1:04 p.m. on today is Monday, February 2nd, 2015. And we'll begin the regular trustee meeting, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there any additions, deletions, changes, modifications to the agenda before us?
I need to add an executive session to under 121.22 G1 appointment, employment, and compensation of a public employee.
Did the appointment, employment?
Appointment, employment, and compensation of a public employee.
Anything else? Fire, roads, IT, HR, administrator, fiscal?
No changes.
Look for a motion to approve the agenda. It's before
So
us.
moved.
As modified with the executive session.
Second.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the payroll in the amount of $260,448.30.
Second.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the bills in the amount of $194,541.92.
Second.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the minutes, December 22nd, 2014, regular meeting.
Second.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 5th, 2015.
Second.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the regular meeting minutes held January 20th, 2015.
Second.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the minutes of the special meeting held January 22nd, 2015.
Second.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
I move to approve the special meeting minutes held January 23rd, 2015.
Second.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the special minutes of the special meeting held January 26th, 2015.
Second.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes. This time we open it up to citizens desiring to speak. Seeing none, we will move on to old business. Revision to the Employee Department Appreciation Proclamation.
Thank you, Board. I have here an update. There was a change that did not make the final draft. It's just one sentence, page 4 in your packet, where it says, underwent a clean financial audit conducted by an unfamiliar agency. It was not changed before it was presented to you. It was suggested by the committee for a change. And now reads, underwent a clean financial audit conducted directly by the state auditor's office. For the past several years, the township has been audited by independent accounting firms. So I have an updated proclamation there for you to sign with that change.
Okay, so the new one has an unfamiliar agency rather than the state?
No, it has the state. The one that you're going to sign has the state.
Okay, so the one in our packet is
shows
wrong.
the old one, right? That's
Okay.
correct.
You want to just give it the same number?
Right.
Yeah, I would just give it the same number. Just I just want to know that there is a revision, and then just sign it.
It's in those minutes. It's like number 23.
So we don't have to approve it or anything, just sign it.
Don't approve it or
No.
No.
I'll just swap them
we'll
out.
just just sign, please.
Are we ready for the second one?
Anything else on that item? We'll move to the second item of old business and look for a motion.
Move to untable motion 2015-028, department rule approval, fire department lateral transfer.
Second.
Okay, second.
Ms. Graf?
Yes.
Mr. Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Kretz?
Yes. Okay, we will, looks like, Chief, you've prepared the gap analysis that we requested.
Yes, sir.
And so, between Administrator and Chief, if you can walk us through this and convince us that we don't need both.
Well, thank you, Board. The first thing I'd point out on page 5 in your packet is the side-by-side comparison of the CPAT test and then the NFPA 1582 evaluation. You can see in each column there the differences of each. We had a little further discussion during the budget hearings as well in regards to the NFPA 1582. I'll be able to answer any questions you have on, or the Chief can as well, in regards to anything in regards to the CPAT test or the NFPA 1582.
Yes, my question would be, which one is most beneficial to us? Which one gives us, which test gives us that which we need to evaluate persons who are going to be requesting a lateral transfer, who are active firefighters in other departments and would like to fill a space that we have advertised?
So to answer the first part of that, the pension test follows the NFPA 1582, where you see a lot of things there that we conduct in a pre-employment conditional offer to what we used to have, part-time employees to full-time. It is not required for employees that are already in the pension system. So if we were lateral entry from somebody obviously in Ohio, it's not required to do the NFPA 1582. Obviously, you can see in the NFPA 1582 medical evaluation, this gives us a baseline, and it will actually determine, I think, in my opinion, a lot more tools for us to assess whether they're physically able to do the job. Also, it's obviously, if you take a look at this column and go back to what we discussed in the budget hearings, this is something that we've talked about doing for an annual basis on annual physicals. This is what's included in that as well. But those adjustments can be made as well in regards to like the treadmill test and everything else.
I guess my comment, and I'll open it a little bit with this, is that when I read through this, I look at the CPAT as a practical test, in that somebody has the ability to perform specific functions that are critical in that job, and demonstrates, at least when they come in, that they have the ability to do it. The medical, the NFPA medical evaluation can find what I'll call latent issues that may not be visible. You may be able to physically be able to do all of those strenuous tasks, but you're unaware of if there's any underlying issue. So like I said or hinted at when I opened up, is I look at this and I think, why wouldn't we require both?
I could piggyback on that if I. Mm-hmm. I got to thinking about this too. We do a physical anyway, whether it's a lateral transfer or a new hire. Don't we put them through a physical anyway? It's our hiring process.
On the last lateral entry that we did not do, which would have been, I don't know the year. Chief, you'll have to help me out on that.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, but we did neither one of these tests.
But that was a little different situation. We only did one. I talked to the chief about this. Really, we only did one. He fell within that time frame of maybe 2 weeks. We're inside of a month of leaving here. We got him back.
Yeah, and I don't know how long he was. So we take that same employee that we're discussing. I don't know how long he was a part-timer and when he had those tests done before we brought him back, since he left the township and then came back. That might have been a short period of time, but I don't know how long from the first CPAT or physical that we did to when we brought them back full-time. My point is when we do lateral entries, it's not required. In other communities that do it, for example, like Kettering, there's a cost savings in regards to saying, okay, well, we don't have to do NFPA 1582 for a new employee because they're already in the pension system. We don't have to pay for the x-rays or stress tests or some of these screenings because they were already went through the pension test when they were employed by, let's say, Beavercreek before they went to lateral entry over to.
Okay, hold that thought. Let's say we hire somebody and it's got 10 years. So they had this pension physical 10 years ago.
Right.
We still would honor that? Or
We're
we would
not-
put them
we
through
don't
our
have-
own- We would put them through our own process anyway. I
We
think it
don't-
would
we
be
don't have
prudent.
to.
Well, I think it would be prudent if we did. I mean.
Well, and that's my point is that I'm saying we should
Okay.
put them through that. I agree
Okay.
with you. Yeah,
Well-
even though if they've been in the pension system for 10 years and worked for, let's say, Hamilton City,
Yeah.
I still think that we should.
Yeah.
Right, so we're gonna put them through a physical anyway, which,
Well,
this would be a good, 1582 would be a good physical for our hiring process regardless of whether it's a lateral transfer or not. We're gonna put them through a physical anyway. The CPAT costs the township nothing. It's on the individual. There's no cost to us in this CPAT, right? So really, it's on the individual. And it's a benefit to the township because the CPAT really, as Mr. Kretz was talking about, it has a benefit, it shows the
Right,
firefighter's
more of a
physical
practical test.
fit. Well, it shows that he's, got stamina, he's got endurance, he's got the ability to do the skills, not only skills, but he's got the physical ability to do the job as well. So,
Is the argument that if, because of the requirement that they already be a firefighter, that the CPAT is redundant? Is that?
that's
somewhat-
right, because
is that a bit of
they
the
would have
argument?
gone through just a combination of either one of these tests to be hired at that department. So, and it depends on the union contracts in regards to the lateral entry. So some departments have lateral entries, like our, contract has it. Kettering, I believe, has it in their contract as well. So, they come up between labor and management, come up with a policy.
Keep in mind also the CPAT is something that typically is a pre-employment tool. And for a lateral, it could potentially delay our hiring because somebody who's already has a full-time job, that's not something they're going to maintain. So we would have to go out and search and find one.
But they would have.
and I would, Mr. Kretz talked about redundancy, and redundancy is something we do in the township. Communications is an important tool for the township, is it not? So don't we have a redundancy in the communications program? I think it's important. The redundancy, I really don't care about the redundancy on the new firefighter, whoever he is. My opinion is if they want to work for this is for Beavercreek Fire Department, Beavercreek Township, this is our standard. They would maintain that standard to come here. The part-timers had to maintain that standard to get hired here. I would argue that we keep this in place. So if there's somebody who has tenure someplace else, that in order to come here to work, they have to meet this standard to get in that door, and that physical as well. I think it protects the township because it assures us that we get somebody who's in shape. Sometimes physicals can miss some things. All right, so the combination of somebody who's fit, and we know they can get through because it's a stringent test. We know they can get through that CPAT test and pass that physical. When we hire them, I think that's about as sure as we can be as a township that we're getting somebody who's fit for the job and experienced to do the job.
And the other question or discussion is at what level? Could there be a combination of both for firefighter positions? I mean, for example, battalion chief level on up, a lot of communities just rely on either in the pension system or just a physical and a drug screening. CPAT is for an entry-level firefighter. Now, some departments do annual physicals. Some department does, they do a like physical abilities test every year. And some places don't do either. So I guess the question is, do we say they have to provide us at a firefighter level both, or one or the other, provide that they completed these? That's the discussion I think we need to have.
So I understand clearly, though, the original draft language was just the required only the 1582, which would have been at the expense of the township, correct?
No.
Would have been at the expense of the prospective employee.
The original draft was an either or, and the supposition was that if they had a 1582 physical as their current employer, they would accept it within the time frame that was set by the board.
And if it was
If
outside?
they didn't, or if it was outside, then CPAT would be the alternative to that.
Okay.
Because not every employer runs a physical assessment. So,
Okay. And if the CPAT was 5 years old,
it would not be acceptable. It'd have to be a current.
so they have to come forward with one or the other.
Yes.
So there was no cost to the township.
Neither one of these that
Okay.
you see in the side by side will be a cost to the township.
As
This-
originally proposed.
Yeah, as proposed in the policy that was tabled.
Strictly lateral entry.
Yeah, this would be strictly lateral entry, but they have to provide this information to us. So, for example, a department does the NFPA 1582 test. Simply, we're going to get a letter from their employer that says they completed their NFPA 1582 test, within the current year or last year, and maybe it wasn't scheduled yet for
Some
for the current
certification,
year.
right.
That says they are fit to do the job. Now, we can also ask what they did that year. So, for example, some departments will do stress tests every other year to match the USAR test for our urban search and rescue team, as well as the hazmat, which I believe the hazmat's every 2 years. Chief, you'd have to correct me on that one. But, yeah, so so they try to coordinate it. Some departments say 1 year, everyone over 50 has to do a stress test as a part of the NFPA 1582, and then the next year they'll say everyone over 40 has to do it. It is actually a lot of these tests that where the occupational service comes to the department to conduct these physicals, they'll tailor it to the township's needs or to the community's needs, or department's needs for that matter, and within what they've had budgeted for that year. So if we look at the policy that was presented at the last meeting, it is important that the employee provides one of these two things to us, and it's an and/or.
Can I ask a question? If an individual provides the NFPA, does the township know what it is they're looking for in that to determine what makes them employable or not? That would be my concern, because
Your ability to interpret it correctly.
to interpret it correctly, and if you're not going to hire something because of something contained in the test, certain testing, that's problematic, and that would be my question.
Right, you'd have to give that to a medical director to review.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be a specific policy about what it is that you're looking for within that, if that's the route that you go.
What usually, when you're doing the NFPA 1582 test, you're going to get a letter that says either you're fit for duty or you're not fit for duty. And then if it's not fit for duty, you'll have the different degree. Now, we won't be able to see it, nor will that current employer be able to see what the employee had problems with here. So if the last thing they had on record was a 60-day letter, I think we as the township would say, we want a letter from your physician that says you are fit for duty, because that's how they do the NFPA, because it goes back to the Ohio Administrative Code. These are non-punitive findings. All they're looking for is corrections.
And that's what I want to make sure that
Yeah.
you guys understand what it is that you're coming out of that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think someone on a lateral entry would hopefully provide the township with, I got an unfit for duty letter with a
Well,
60-day.
Well, we're not
But
gonna
if,
hire that.
but if your policy states that they must provide a fit for duty,
Letter.
then it answers your question and it eliminates the opportunity for your scenario.
Right.
How difficult is it for us to perhaps set up some of these CPAT abilities tests?
It is not a reasonable expectation to do that.
Okay.
We have a license for Beavercreek, so, there's a little bit of treading line that we have to do on how we use CPAT. But putting that aside, there's very specific equipment that has to be purchased. There's a very specific time frame for offering the test and proctoring the test and things like that. It would absolutely be not cost economical to do that. If we did anything, we would want to make a Beavercreek physical abilities
Yeah.
test and administer it ourselves.
How difficult would that be?
We've done it in the past. The problem there is there's no standard, and so you get whatever bias comes in with the instructors and the proctors and whoever's designed the test.
Back to Dawn's point.
All those other issues. So I would not recommend that. If we're gonna choose something, we should choose a national standard. That was the whole point of what was drafted in most of the boards, we put standard A or standard B, depending on which of those two the candidate could reasonably get. We could certainly, as the board has already pointed out, say we want A and B. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only hesitation I would have is that if you have somebody who's a mid-career professional, that we're trying to get here because they have quality or things that we want to bring, we're trying to entice them, the harder we make it for them to come here, the less likely they are. So it's not to say they wouldn't. In some cases, we're a much better employer than other places for a number of reasons. Pay, facilities, personnel, training opportunities, those things. But every impediment that stands in their way is one reason more for them to not choose to come when we're trying to entice them, when we're trying to recruit them to come to us. So that's the only cautionary. I don't have anything quantitative to say that, it would keep us from getting good people or the people we wanted, but it is going to make it a step more difficult if they have to go through an entry-level testing program in order to come work for us after we're essentially trying to get them to come here.
Now, I would maintain that the CPAT is endorsed by Joint Labor and Management and IFF. And the 1582 is National Fire Protection Association standard. So you have two standards. It doesn't cost the township anything. And I would maintain with the history of the fire department and the injury history and the medical disability history, I would maintain that I would rather have somebody, if it's tenure and they work to get the CPAT and can get in here, they would give them incentive to get in here as far as I'm concerned, and I think would protect the township from an early disability retirement, particularly 10 years. Somebody in the workforce who's not kept fit, has may have kept their skills up but not stayed fit. The township is at risk for an early retirement, disability on somebody like that. If they come in here with the CPAT and this 1582 physical, I don't think we can ask for much better than that, from a start of any employee coming here, new or lateral transfer with 10, 15 or whatever. Especially if it doesn't cost the township anything. If somebody wants to work here, I would think they would start working toward passing that CPAT test.
If you were gonna say something, Chief?
I was just gonna point out that if their current employer did not offer 1582, we would be required to provide that, so there would be a cost for it.
That's what I thought
Well, it's,
but if they have it, we're
But
not
it's
gonna,
or,
we're not
right.
gonna repeat it.
Right.
So the way you have it is an
and it's a or. Correct. The policy reads,
As proposed.
as proposed, it reads, current CPAT or fit for duty result from an NFPA 1582 compliant physical within 1 year of Beavercreek Township Fire Department conditional offer.
So if they had
So-
neither, they would not be a candidate, period.
If they have neither, they wouldn't be able to apply.
Right, if we remove the or, and we had it just where it was CPAT and 1582, then if they had neither, they're not a candidate.
That's correct.
And so we're recruiting someone then that has neither. It would be on the recruit essentially to get one of those tests or get both of those tests completed. I understand this could be from a recruiting impediment. It could cause a delay if you needed to fill a position in an emergency situation where you needed to fill a replacement. But from at this point, I guess I would be in favor of having both and then working towards having a 1582 for separate from the lateral entry, but adopting something like that on an annual basis. But sticking with lateral entry for right now, I would say that it should be just CPAT and 1582. You've only done one in the last 10 years, is that correct? 2? Okay. And so if they want to come here, there's a reason there's a motivation to come here. It's either conflict with their existing situation, or financial, or logistics, or a combination of those three. And so I think we want to maintain a premier department as best we can, and I think we want to limit our exposure as most reasonable. So I guess I would recommend having both, unless there's some other argument not to.
In general, we have pretty well known it well in advance when there'll be a vacancy. Now let's say we know there's a vacancy in August, or will be a vacancy in August. I just pulled that out. Will we advertise, let's say in June or May, that there will be this vacancy and you need these things? So that there shouldn't be a delay if there's enough time to apply for the job.
Well,
You could have one of your potential retirees walk in tomorrow, though.
Well, yeah, I
There's a
understand. I'm saying
there's a
if we
window,
know in advance.
right.
If you don't know in advance, then you don't know. And as if you don't have someone on board, and someone else has to step in until you get someone.
well, essentially, if we get a letter from an employee or some sort of notification that they intend to retire, that helps. But besides the hiring of the last 9, the one before was a 2-week notice. When the gentleman came in and said, "I'm going to med school, see ya." So now you're right, we have several people eligible to retire now that could simply come back from a vacation and say, "I'm done," and give a 2-week notice. So, or today's my last day and retire. They can do that as well. So the combination of both or I think is a better fit for recruiting, having or. But if the board chooses both, I think it limits, because quite frankly, we'd be one of few departments that do lateral entry and would even require either one of those.
I think we should set the standard.
So if you're asking for a recommendation from me, I would say or. I think they capture both. If they can prove within it that they've had either one of those within a year. If they want to come, then they have to get one of those 2. Obviously, fit for duty test, they can get pretty easily in a day-to-day. Current CPAT, they'll have to travel over to Indiana, I think, who does it every other week or weekly in Indianapolis.
Could we say both preferred, where the required is the or, both are preferred?
If I look at this, if I had to choose one over the other, I would choose the 1582.
And the other thing we could add to that is So, you know, depending, we could say a 1582 with a current stress test. You're gonna catch a lot more in a stress test than,
Well, who's gonna pay for the stress test?
it'll be incumbent upon the employee. If they have to provide this before.
Like I said, there's a motivation for them to
Yeah.
come here.
Yeah.
There's some motivated.
So if they
That's
had,
what I'm saying, exactly.
so if they had a 1582 test, so let's say we had a firefighter from another community have a 1582 test, and it was the opposite year, the department said, we're not gonna do, stress tests, he can go back to that company who did the NFPA 1500 test and say, I just need a stress test, and it'll be upon that employee. So I think the way the policy is written, one, motivates the employee to have either one of those. And potentially we could say fit for duty test with a stress test or a compliant stress test. And I just reviewed the language with legal, and they're okay with the number 2, how it reads in protection of the township.
I would maintain this. We're hiring an employee for long term. Employees are an investment for the taxpayer, and I would say that we should do our own physical. We should invest in an upfront physical, and we should do our own evaluation. Whether it's an NFPA, whatever, we should have the current information on that individual when they walk in this door. And there's not gonna be any better information on that individual than a current physical, call it the 1582, and a CPAT. You're gonna know right offhand, and credentials, that guy's ready to go, all right? There's no stress test here, no stress test there. The physical can miss something. The CPAT is going to make a determination whether he can breathe or not, okay? He's going to have to breathe good and pass that test.
Oh, I do.
And them stairs. So a lot of that stuff is going to be a given, plus the NFPA that we pay for. And we make sure we have current information on that person that walks in this room and works for this township. That's where I stand on it. And there's no either or, it's both. You come on here, we want to make sure you're fit to go and you're ready to go. And as far as time goes, there's never an emergency here. All right, we have overtime, we have slot, we can get people in here. We won't have any problem getting people in there. There's 3,000 people out there waiting for a job in the fire service in this region.
Well, if we're talking lateral entry, we're not, our
Well,
pool's
you
a lot
must have
smaller.
somebody in mind
Yeah,
because
our-
you're talking
our
lateral
pool's-
entry.
And quite frankly, this is just for lateral entry. The other discussion is we get nobody, then what do? And then we're gonna have to go back to what other communities have done for years is a more traditional testing process. It doesn't have to be civil service, but it would mirror something like that in
And
regards to
I guess
hiring
what I'm
practice.
hearing is that there's a lack of trust in someone else's NFPA test, because all you get is fit for duty and not fit for duty.
Certified by a physician, yes.
And maybe the sort of compromise would be, if we know there is someone who's good, who has applied, give them a conditional offer, as we normally do, put them through a physical that we have, whatever we think is important, which could be the NFPA plus the stress test or whatever other pieces we think are important. And if they pass that, then it meets our criteria. Because I'm
These-
seeing is the CPAC is the physical energy, and you're saying the physical activity. And I think what Mr. Zaharia is saying is that a really good stress test would provide that information if the person is physically fit to do the job by the stress test.
Well,
But if you, let me just throw, so I can try to logic through it in my own mind. If you have the 1582 and you do not have the CPAT, and your 1582 was done last year and your department is on a cycle where they're not doing it again this year, you have to make an effort to go schedule your stress test.
Or the complete test, yes.
Okay, or the complete test, which would be no different than going and you'd have to do that either way, but,
The idea for lateral entry of any organization is to you're reducing the cost because all the stuff that was done in the pre-employment screening.
well, they're trained.
So, and we are assuming that they're fit for duty in their current department. Now, what we have here in the minimum qualifications under the proposed policy is we're taking an extra step with Beavercreek Township and saying, okay, we understand that you're currently employed full-time, you're currently enrolled in the Ohio Police and Fire Fund, but we also require all these other things: certification, level 2, paramedic certification, and a medical certification, and we're giving them an option. So, we, to go back to what Mr. Paxton's saying, is taking that extra step that some communities do not do.
At what rank would you be typically looking for lateral entry?
Firefighter.
At firefighter, not at battalion chief or
At this
above?
point, our current plan for the midterm is to develop our internal employees for promotion. So we'd be looking at lateral entry to entry level position, firefighter position, and then develop our current firefighters into our officer.
Okay. And CPAT is only good for 1 year. And most departments, you're saying, use it for for new hires, but then it's shelved. It's put on the shelf. It's not repeated. It's not
That's
required.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, but I guess I'm still in a true natural disaster situation or whatever, where you had a major scenario. I think we can come back and we could modify the policy if we needed to address that. But I guess at this point, I would look for a motion to approve it with an and strike the or.
Okay, I'll make that motion that we approve the lateral, would this be a lateral transfer policy, or this just the fire department?
Lateral entry.
This is a policy for lateral entry for firefighters.
Is this a policy or is this a article
This is a
within a
policy.
policy?
I'll give you the policy number.
The whole policy, okay.
That's
To approve the policy
I would say.
for lateral transfer with the inclusion of certified physical ability test and the NFPA 1582 occupational medical evaluation of members for the standard of lateral transfer and new hires for not lateral transfer. They
That's
gotta have
separate.
CPAT anyway.
If you could pass that policy, we're essentially gonna approve the policy with the modification, removing the or, correct?
Yeah.
I'll second it for the purpose of discussion. But I believe what's recommended by our staff with the or is a much more practical way to work. And if it doesn't work out, we can always change it in the future. So that I would not go with the and. I believe it should remain the way it is as proposed by the staff.
Okay, so the motion is to approve it as presented with the CPAT and NFIPA 1582,
Correct.
That's the motion.
correct?
Okay.
Call?
For current firefighter, that's a firefighter position.
For fire, right, lateral entry for firefighter position.
Well, we're still in discussion.
Right.
Everybody's a firefighter from the ground up. So you're a firefighter first, whether you're the chief or whether you're a new recruit coming in.
Yeah, but if my point, and that's why I said it earlier, at what level do you say, we're not gonna do this? This is for lateral entry of firefighters. We don't have any other provisions for lateral entry of lieutenants or battalion chiefs, deputy chiefs, and so on. So,
So right now, this would be the prevailing policy for all lateral entry
Right.
positions in the fire, okay. You understand? I knew you did, I just wanted to ask.
Right. Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Ms. Graff,
No,
Mr. Kretz.
Yes. Next item on the agenda, new business, there's none, so we'll go to administrator. Farm agreement update.
Thank you, board. I did provide 2 items in your packet for discussion, and one would be the agreement with current agreement with the farmer, Mr. Shawhan, on the Indian Ripple parcel, and the CAUV application. I did meet with Mr. Shawhan. He did pay the township for the taxes on the property, as well as the difference between the taxes and what was provided in the contract, which was $7,100, and then his second half of the lease that he owed, which is a $500 payment. So those are all payments are up to date. Mr. Shawhan does want to continue the agreement with the township. What we have in the packet was an updated one that would automatically renew. What I'm going to ask the board today is that we table the farm agreement and the CAUV application. I was contacted today by an organization who is looking to put football fields on parkland within the city and the township. Previously, Mr. Parks and I met with the group. We showed them what parcels are available within the township. Actually got a phone call this afternoon that says they are eager, no pun intended, to look at the Indian Ripple property. Mr. Parks and I scheduled a meeting with them, and they would like to make a presentation to the Board of Township Trustees at the next meeting before they invest any time or additional money into surveys of the Indian Ripple property. So I don't feel comfortable providing either one of these right now to the board for signature or approval until you hear the presentation from the Eager Beaver Football Club in regards to working with the township on developing the park.
Is there a reason that they've given you that they prefer the Indian Ripple property to the fairgrounds property?
Yes, a lot more room. They actually, today, the president or CEO of the organization said they would like the entire parcel, obviously, except for the wooded area.
What's the deadline for Mr. Shawhan as far as planting?
Our
Buying seed. He's got to buy. I'm sure he has to make
plans.
plans.
The current agreement we have is till the end of March. I was hoping to get a decision from the board to go ahead and move forward. I told him it'd be in the next several weeks before.
Just so he has adequate.
Yeah, he's not expecting anything today.
Okay.
That was just something that staff was able to put together and to help Mr. Shawhan out with farming, that we'd get it done early. If we did sign this today, it wouldn't go into effect till April 1st anyhow, because we have a current agreement that's in place.
Okay.
And
So
the CAUV application is not due till the first Monday in March, so we do have some time on that.
Okay, on the parcels, are they cut by the road at all?
Yes.
Because you're saying that they want the entirety, and if we take the 2 pieces that are here, that's 97 acres. Do they, Eager Beaver, just want the 63, or?
Well, they do like there's actually, the parcel is actually split by 2 roads, Indian Ripple and Upper Belt. They, as I said, today they said they would like all the farm area, so the fields that are open. So we're looking at the parcel on the south side of Indian Ripple.
Which is how many acres?
Well, it's all in one right now. I think that one's is 11.
Like 7.5
7.5.
usable.
Yeah.
7.5?
And then
But we have 97 in front of us. I want to know what the football people are looking at versus the farm.
Well, crops are on
They're-
it says right here, crops are on approximately 64 acres of the property.
that's what they're looking at.
Okay,
is
so
the
they're looking
64
at the
acres.
64.
That's
okay.
correct.
But is he doing this split parcel in his farming, or is it all in one piece?
Currently, he's farming the 63 acres that are spread out between there's 2 parcels. There used to be 4 parcels, and the auditor was able to get it down to 2 parcels.
But he farms all of the tillable land.
All the tillable land that you see on the
Yeah,
application.
but he can come across the street. I mean,
yeah.
I just was, I don't have it in my mind's eye what we are doing. So if you would have that
Part of the
diagram
yes,
for the
obviously.
next meeting when the
One of the
football
things I
people show
discussed
up.
with the CEO or president of the Football League is that we would put a presentation together to the board on their ideas, not actual survey drawings, but what they envision at their board meeting, what they're going to use, where the parking is going to be, where the entrance would be. It still depends on the survey of the property. They wanted to survey the property this week. That's how fast they're ready to move on it. I said, I don't feel comfortable having that organization go ahead and spend the money. And then the 16th after the presentation, the board says, how about we go out to fairgrounds? And then they would have to invest that money as well. So I think we need to see an overall presentation from them. One of the things that we did talk about with them, we don't have the funding. So they're willing to put up 100% of the cost. But one thing I made clear with them, and Mr. Parks, you can intervene anytime, is that we did not want to run into a situation where they were the only ones allowed to use the park. We do not want to run into a situation where this is just one organization in the township.
Non-exclusive lease.
Right.
You're not looking at a ground lease. or
No,
anything like that.
what we would envision in an agreement is first right of refusal. That, their organization would have first right of refusal on the use of the fields. There's another organization, flag football, et cetera, who wants to use the fields, they would be able to use them. Now, there would be some maintenance obviously involved with the park as well, that would be the responsibility of the township.
Are they contemplating turf or grass?
It's a grass,
Okay.
at least in the first presentation. They
Because
said
you
grass.
also have organizations looking for lacrosse fields.
That was another thing we talked about. I said it's starting to become very popular in Beavercreek. Obviously, Centerville, Bellbrook all have programs, and now there's a big push in this area to do lacrosse. Their only concern is lacrosse really tears up the field, much like soccer. But they said they would work with us on identifying maybe certain fields would be used, maybe the practice fields would be used for everybody, and maybe just we identify those fields as lacrosse. But essentially, this is step one of even talking about a partnership with a nonprofit organization within the community. They are very eager for space. They are very limited, and a lot of times they are having to cancel a lot of games because
They stack up.
they stack up, and then if that organization or where they're using the field says, something else has come up, then they kick them off the field. So they would be looking for putting everything in, and then having a first right of refusal, and then of course we would look at obviously some sort of maintenance of the field.
And there's no water and sewer down there.
Not yet. There will be water with the development that the zoning commission, the trustees, and the regional planning just approved.
Zimfer.
For Zimfer, they're going to be putting a 24-inch line from essentially where it stops just east of Country Club of the
What I'm
North.
saying is I don't think there should be any expectation on the part of the user that there will be any restroom facilities that will be put in at this point in time. Because we don't have, the way we have at Rotary Park and we have a community park.
Well, we had that discussion with them as well. I think they are looking at something like that, much like the discussion we had with Rotary in regards to the concession stands. They are looking at those things, but in the meantime, you may see
Putting them in?
Yeah, at first you may be seeing, a couple fields put in with potential portable, and then eventually the next phase would be concession and restrooms. So yes, they are definitely looking at those things.
It's what, a 12-week, or, it starts August and goes through,
You can go into November.
Yeah.
if they go to, if their teams go to playoffs.
Yeah.
So, but it's still, there's a season there where you
Correct.
could handle it with portable. Like,
Some of the other stuff they talked about in discussions is bringing the lights to the field.
right.
And that's some of the stuff that we discussed with them. We can't do that at this point. If you put them in, they're yours to maintain. I think as we drill down through this, I think we'll become more clear on our responsibilities compared to theirs. And the other, as you brought up, the driving force behind this right now is lacrosse.
Mhm.
If you're currently, the schools was kind enough to tell the cross they can use. And the field that they use currently is not in one of the better shaped fields around.
They've been after this for a long time, and I know that.
Yeah, and they're,
Encouraged them a little.
he did tell me today on the phone, they would like to see something in by the end of this year. So, which goes to the first two bullets under my section here, is I'd like to hold off until we hear the presentation before we enter into an agreement with Mr. Shawhan and complete the CUV application.
Will they be at the next meeting then?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Mr. Parks and I have a meeting with him next week, and I told him the schedule for having a presentation ready to go.
Now, I just want to know where I am. You know I do not like porta potties. I'm one of the driving forces behind the restrooms we have at the current facility we have. At the time we put those in, we had a state tax that we were fortunate enough to be able to provide restroom facilities and lights for the fields. We do not have those resources any longer. And so the rethinking of how we can provide any improvements, even the initial improvements and the maintenance of it, has to be very well thought through, because we don't have the ability to get the money to put it in. Restrooms, I think, were close to $500,000 by the time we finished. The lights, I think, were $500,000 to $750,000. We don't have that kind of money anymore, and the maintenance of those facilities are expensive. So I think we really have to let them know that as much as we might like to do it, we don't have the ability.
Yeah, Mr. Parks and I were very clear on our first initial meeting, and the initial meeting was more of a discussion, and we were very frank with them that we do not have the funding to do this. Now, we entered into a partnership where they put the infrastructure in, they put the fields in, then depending on how the agreement looks, we would be able to maintain some things with staff. Okay, and that's,
So they were gonna do the grading,
yes.
they're gonna do the grading. Okay.
They're ready to put what I heard today on the phone,
Shovel ready.
they are ready to go ahead and get a survey, lay the fields out, and start grading and seed before spring.
And they bring in their own graders and their own everything.
They have people lined up, and that's the impression I got, that Mr. Parks and I got. They're ready to go, and they have people and volunteers lined up with certain skills that would be able to come in and do a lot of these things.
They have a lot of corporate supporters that would help with that. So, but it has to be thought out.
Yeah, and so next meeting, hopefully we'll have a presentation for you, and with maps and everything of just a general outline drawing of what they envision the park to look like. Of course, you know, one of the things that we would like to look at is preserving the wooded area that is going to be right next to the new development that's going in, which is Wood Ridge. So I wouldn't advocate removing any of those trees. Now, for the northwest portion of that property, it drops off pretty quick into the creek.
They say they might want to hit the survey, but they need to make sure they get their topo.
Right.
Because that's going to be the.
Yeah. And I think that's why they're interested also in the fields on the east side of Upper Bell, because that's essentially all flat right there. So.
I was gonna ask Tim about, we were talking 64 acres. I mean, that's a chunk of extra work coming your way if we're gonna maintain the grounds. So,
We almost need to see a plan,
yeah,
see what they're proposing.
well, football fields is, you know there's gonna be a lot of grass there.
We know that.
We know that much.
And they must have a lot of mowers,
Yeah.
because they're gonna do the mowing, right?
Well, we don't know
Well,
yet.
that's what I don't know.
We want to see. We don't know. I don't think we're really getting into the details of what an agreement would look like. What we need to look at is the concept first, and see whether the Board of Township Trustees is even interested in that concept on that parcel, because in the park master plan, the fishing property on Fairgrounds identifies the football fields. And we showed them that first, and they already had a copy of it, because they went to the
Right.
city of Beavercreek first. And the
They've
city of
looked at that
Beavercreek said,
before.
hey, you need to come out, you need to come out and talk to the township, because the park master plan shows football fields at that property over there. We went through and looked at that, and
It would be tight.
yeah, it would be tight on what they want to do. So today's phone call was, hey, we want to take a look at the bigger parcel that you just acquired, and we're very interested in that.
Part of the question will be, outside of their season, because during their season, they're gonna need practice fields, game fields, parking, restroom facilities of some nature, and concession. And then if they wanna go into evening hours beyond daylight savings time, then they're gonna need some type of lights. The question then becomes, if you do have a first right of refusal, or you block a season for them, what multi-purpose value can you get out of it the rest of the year? For spring lacrosse or something like that?
True, we would have we would probably have a lot of the other sports groups contacting us for practice fields.
Right,
That
soccer,
seems-
BSA tournaments,
Yeah.
you got
You
the extension of Creek Classic, you got all kinds
Exactly.
of things, so.
Yeah, so we can look at those multiple use. But some of the discussion we had with them initially is that there would be a couple fields that they would say football, and would be for football only, but a lot of the practice fields and other fields could be multi-use. Those are all things that we had to have further discussion with them. And based on what he said today on the phone, they're talking a lot of fields. So the original 4 that we were looking up at the fairgrounds property, obviously they're looking at a lot more at the Indian Ripple property.
Right.
So, and of course the other thing I think that we and staff need to look at too is putting out something in there in the future as a park. Besides maybe trails, Mr. Zimfer already wants to put an easement in to have his development have access to the park. The question is, what do we have on that side of the property for future? So, so we'll have some internal questions as well of what we're gonna do with the western part of the property in regards to just regular park use.
And then also have to at the same time look at the plan for, isn't there a plan to cut a road through there to access the airport
No,
without
that's-
having to go all the way around?
That is closer to Country Club of the North. Yeah, that is on the proposed road.
It's on the other
county
side of
plan,
Zimford.
Yes,
Okay.
is Country Club of the North. It goes through the next parcel next to Country Club of the North, straight to Valley Road.
Okay. It'll be interesting to hear their thoughts.
Yeah, and the other thing too we need to talk about is naming it. And part of the agreement, and like we discussed in the budget hearing as well, is to reach out to the family, because in the agreement they're going to be involved in naming the park.
Maybe you can do that in the meantime and see what kinds of names that they would propose to bring forth.
At least initiate the process. Right?
Absolutely.
Is it the Eager Beaver program?
All right, so we'll table the farm agreement update in the CAUV application until further notice.
Yeah, until I would just say until the board makes a decision whether.
Really the first meeting in March, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, actually, then it gives us 2 things, because if we choose not to go with the CAUV and not to rent it, the farming, then we have to ask for tax exemption,
That's
otherwise
right.
we end up paying the
That's
property tax.
Right.
That's
So we
right.
wanna get in there quickly.
That's right. That's why we're holding off to both of those until a decision's made by the board.
Okay. Controlled bow hunting.
Just going to update the board. Yesterday was the end of the season. There were actually 3 very active participants who were almost out there every day. I got emails almost every day that they were out there. Obviously, from the emails I sent you from a couple weeks ago, there is a coyote issue. And I also received some pictures from Saturday with the little snow that we got on the ground of some nice daytime pictures of some coyotes out there. So it was very successful. Initially on, they saw a lot of deer, and they were only able to harvest 1. All the hunters participated in the Indian Ripple property. We didn't have any go over to the fairgrounds property this year, so that was pretty interesting. They all wanted the new ground. And of course, everybody was talking about the big buck they would see on Mr. Zimfer's property, but never on ours. I did receive two requests from the two individuals, Mr. Rice, who's a disabled veteran, and from Mr. Russell, who wanted to ask the board if they would be interested in controlling the coyotes, and see if there was any interest. There is no season, it's a permit process on the property.
Start playing football and light it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
They're gonna go somewhere though.
they wanted to, those two individuals asked me to pass on if the board is
If they
interested.
would be if we'd be willing to
If
let
you would
them
be
go out
willing
and
to allow
harvest the
them,
coyotes.
that would, yeah. And I asked what you do with the coyotes, and neither one of them really had an answer for me.
It's the pelts, yeah, it's the
Yeah.
pelts or the
Yeah.
trophy.
You
but
give them to the animal control area and have them figure
So
out.
I don't know if there's any interest in that.
Is there a bow season? Is there a bow season for coyote, or it's all gun?
You get them with anything. It's kind of controlled in and around deer gun season and things like that. What you can use and not use to get a coyote with, but right now deer ended the first.
Right.
So
No, but I'm saying,
It's-
would we want rifle on there?
Well, that's-
Well,
that's the thing.
right now, we
Do you really-
currently exclude rifle use
That's my
on,
point.
on our parcels. The only way to control is that they're proposing is rifle.
That's what I'm asking, if you can, I've never heard of anyone bow hunting coyotes.
Yeah.
Start a new
Well,
sport.
You can tell them they
that's
could.
right.
Can you trap them? And then
Start a
You
new
trap
sport.
'em.
New sport.
You know, there's the alternative is what they call pistol caliber carbines. They don't have the trajectory that rifles do. You know, the rifle format, but they don't have the full jacket for the rifle.
200 yards.
Yeah, they don't have that kind of capability. That was a new thing introduced to deer gun season this year. So
Yeah, it's certainly not a policy that we have in place, but obviously they felt that there's a lot of coyote that are pushing the deer off that parcel. So,
And as soon as the coyotes get near the residential areas, we'll hear about it, so we might.
well, and I will tell you, there has been some complaints in the region about some coyotes getting into the cities.
Oh, there are.
Yeah.
I know where they are.
And then I tell you who really has an issue is Westchester Township.
Oh,
You could-
we have it here.
You could do a nuisance permit and open up a very short window rather than have 223s out there year round.
Right.
That would be the rifle of choice for a coyote.
I think so.
So, but I think you'd want to give it a little bit more thought.
Yeah, if you guys.
Was there any complaints from neighboring property owners about people crossing fence lines or anything like that?
No, we had, not this year, we didn't have any. Last year was actually a hunter they had permission from a different landowner who was actually on our parcel, who had set up their deer stand on the fairgrounds property. So that was the only issue we had.
Okay.
And no complaints this year, other than the positive comments we had from the bow hunters themselves.
Okay. Well, maybe you can put together some ideas then as far as either a limited, controlled nuisance permit type or something of that nature. Or create a new sport, bow hunting coyotes. Sheriff's Office report.
Thank you, Board. One thing that I asked the sheriff to do is they do provide lengthy reports. I asked them, much like we asked our department heads and departments to do, is break down a bi-weekly report. It is broken down into call types, so as you can see there, 911 hang up. And one thing I'd like to point out that the sheriff's office is very proud of through the substation here in Beavercreek Township is the amount of business checks they do, as well as the home checks that they do. And a lot of the home checks are upon request from our residents. Usually they're out of town for quite some time. These reports will be in your packet every 2 weeks. If there's any additional questions, I'll be able to meet with our liaison, the major, the patrol section, and answer any questions that you may have.
What is the extra patrol? Is that the people coming in from the regular people coming across there?
No, extra patrol is, I believe, radar, when they're running radar. So they
okay.
received a complaint that there's a lot of speeders in the area, so they set up there that extra patrol.
When I first looked at it and I saw the Pentagon Boulevard, I said, oh, and then I realized we still have one parcel where it's a lock and store that's in the township surrounded by city.
And I would also point out in the agreement with the sheriff's office is that they are patrolling township and they're supposed to stay in the township unless there's a 99 or an emergency drop by another agency. So if there was a surrounding agency like Beavercreek or Xenia who needed assistance, or the highway patrol along the highways, they would respond and sometimes are out of the jurisdiction just in those emergencies, much like we saw last year or year before last with the cruiser that went up and got a bullet hole in it in Yellow Springs.
Yeah, as far as activity is for any one given category, is it typical? Is it above average, below average?
That was a good question. I did ask the major about that. He says that's common. Some of the areas that they are focusing on and continue to focus on is Orchard and 35 and some of the activity down there that they're running into.
And based on the level of activity, are we adequately staffed as far as the number of deputies that we have?
Currently, with the 4th deputy filling in to cover any leaves, we're adequately staffed at that level. The one thing that if by chance, if there, let's say a deputy calls off and that 4th deputy cannot make it and they can't get anybody to cover, what they'll do is take the next section over and they patrol the township. So there's always a cruiser in the township. It may not be the township employed and owned vehicle, but it'll be a cruiser from the outside. Also, they have the special deputies who a lot of times when they come to do their ride time, they'll put them in Beavercreek Township or Village of Spring Valley, I believe.
Any other questions on the sheriff's report? The 2015 strategic goals update.
Board, in your packet, you'll see that from the last one that was approved, I did modify it a little bit to break it down into the goals 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then the last section there at the bottom is the ones that were tabled. These are estimated timelines based on discussion with the board as well as staff. I was asked to provide you an update and a proposed timeline for these goals and objectives.
Any questions, comments, suggestions?
Just move ahead as quickly as you can.
Thank you, board. Just another update on something that with an ongoing project that staff's been working on is the energy audit. I'm happy to report that started. They were here at 7:30 when I got here, so consultants came in today and completed a very detailed assessment, at least of what I saw of this building this morning. And they started with this one, and then they were heading out to the other buildings.
When will they be complete, or when do they anticipate being complete?
They really have not given us a timeline.
Human resources.
Board, in your on the agenda here, this is kind of, and I would, the first bullet there, the part-time carrier job description, I'd like to move that with the discussion in the fire packet. We do have a job description, and this is a discussion only item for both for the part-time courier, but we do have a completed job description that I'll pass out today for your review. No decisions need to be made today, but I'd like to move that down to the bottom there with the fire department.
Okay.
The next item, the IT salary discussion. I did send out yesterday or last night a very lengthy report completed by staff. This is obviously a change based on the decision that was made at the budget hearing. Today we were going to be providing a job description for a new position. As you recall, the board had decided to continue on with a contract position, but still would like to see the information that we had collected. And they did a very detailed analysis, including provided budget information from other townships as well.
Okay. As far as our IT coverage then, have we had discussion yet with
We
Mr.
have
Erickson?
Yeah, we have a meeting this week with Mr. Erickson to discuss his contract.
Okay. All right.
Where's that the report that was in the weekend review?
Yeah, it was about another 200 some pages. The next item I'd like to discuss in your packet is the IT biweekly report, but also in the biweekly report as provided by.
Was there anything on zoning? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm
As
sorry.
far as we skipped
I'm
that.
skipping through here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The IT report. Any questions on the human resource biweekly report?
Nope, no question.
All right. No, so we'll go on to zoning then.
Zoning. One thing, Mr. Amrine could not be here today, so he would ask the board that we postpone the update and discussion on the Newport nuisance declaration. So he's available to answer the questions and come up with an update and a plan on the next step that we need to take in regards to that issue.
The only one thing I would ask him, maybe you can just pass on to Mr. Amrine, is that it's premature right now, but sometime in maybe March, that we just send a letter or have some, maybe just a phone call, some communication with the developer over at Arlington.
Yes, we've already.
Just to initiate a goodwill, a good faith reminder
Yeah.
that, hey, you're supposed, let's keep it up this summer so we don't have to come back and do a nuisance.
I met at length with Mr. Amrine before the OTA conference, and he had planned on doing it.
Okay. And if we have any recurring issues like that, maybe if we head them off in the spring, they won't be such an issue in the summer.
In your packet on page 31 is the biweekly report from Mr. Amrine. Like I mentioned, we did, besides the goals and objectives that were laid out for the administrator, Mr. Amrine and I are also working on several other projects within his department as well in regards to updating plans. And one thing that we're focused on, which is also a goal for under the TA, and we are collecting a lot of information on that, is the zoning fees. And he is starting to see some movement in regards to some applications coming in for site plans as well. The site plan that was scheduled to happen this week has been deferred till March on that development. We still have an incomplete application. So we made it clear to the applicant, where the zoning commission will not hear a partial or not review a partial application. So we're still waiting on a few documents. We gave the applicant some timeline. They understood that if they didn't have it in by a certain day, and they weren't too upset concerning moving it to March. But I think in March you're going to see a movement by getting that development started.
Any updates on Greene County Regional Planning?
We discussed a little bit, we plan on having a decision really by the end of March.
So executive committee met.
They met last Tuesday.
Okay.
Mr. Amrine and Mr. Paxton were
Yeah.
both present.
We had some pretty good discussions about that, the money and all that, and I conveyed the message that we wanted to see their plan and how they were gonna finance the program, and he threw it back in my court. It said we should submit something first to them.
Who's he?
Tom
Cougar. Okay.
was there, he's their the county commissioner's
Sure.
representative. So, and I countered basically and said, we just would like to know what your intentions are, so a presentation on your behalf will let us know what your intentions are. So that's kind of where we're at. we kinda wanna get as many trustees as we can there, not trustees, representatives of the townships, mainly their trustees, for the next few meetings, and, have some thorough discussion on the matter, and come up with something, in March. That's the intention, so.
But I heard from the commissioners at our Township Association meeting, the impression I got was we townships can do whatever we like. If we choose to continue with the present formation of Greene County Regional Planning, we're essentially on our own and have to figure out how to support it. How to come up with the financial resources, because the county definitely won't come up with more money, and it was sort of questionable whether they were gonna continue their current support. You had the same impression, Mr. Grassi?
Yeah, that's what Mr. Kugler verbalized, was that it would be, the only way that they would sustain the funding they had is if they had more control of the process.
Right.
So, and that they had more resources they could apply if they had it under their supervision, or however you want to frame it.
And from where we're coming, I believe the concern that we have expressed, as Beavercreek Township and other townships have expressed, is we don't want to control all the planning and the development in Greene County, if it goes that way. But we would like to have some recommending powers, such as we have now, when it comes to our zoning cases, or township zoning cases, and township site plans, and what, similar to what we have now, we would like to be in on the decision-making for recommendations, because they don't make any of the full decisions, except maybe for site plans. And that was not forthcoming as a possibility from the county's presentation that I heard.
But again, it'd be nice to see their plan, so. Somebody has it in their mind's eye, now you have to just be able to articulate that and communicate that to
Sure,
everybody
they know
else at
what
the
they wanna
table.
do.
So. Otherwise, it leaves questions, and that's what has to be mitigated. Okay, anything else on zoning? Move on to IT.
Thank you, Board. In the IT, you have your bi-weekly report. If there's any questions, Mr. Terry and myself can answer any questions that you may have in regards to the bi-weekly report. The one thing I'd like to point out that's also in the bi-weekly report is the assessment that was completed by Green Tree, Back to Business IT Network assessment. They did come back, and Mr. Terry and I did meet with them at their facility. Mr. Terry has the 400-page report with him. What's in your packet, starting on page 37, is the summary of the overall 400-page report, risk report. One thing to point out, even though it says high risk 97, one of the things that Green Tree did point out to us is that we have a good to very good network system. These scores here are related to what they found in regards to priorities and issues that the system has. So not critical issues that are on page 35, and then again in the report starting on page 37. But of the areas that are in the bullet on page 35, they feel that these are high-risk issues. Mr. Erickson and Mr. Terry have been working on those. So page 39, they have identified the unsupported operating systems. We do have a couple surveillance boxes or CPU workstations that have Windows XP, and we need to look at updating those to current version, because Microsoft no longer provides patches or security updates to XP. So we need to look at those. The anti-spyware not installed and antivirus not installed, these were found on a couple virtual desktops, one of them being mine, and one of the servers These have been corrected. So some of them did have them on there, but the program did not ping it as it was operating on that. So those have been corrected. And we use one program for the anti-spyware and the antivirus as well. User password on page 40, set never to expire. We reviewed those. It's a very small amount that have user passwords never set to expire. These are for administrator logins to different components, including some of the servers, which is an acceptable risk for those. As everybody else in the township knows, we are required to change our passwords. Now, one thing that Mr. Terry and the engineer talked about is maybe taking a look at our current policy on passwords and shorten that time period and maybe adding some characters to it as well, which the employees tend not to like. However, but in the IT world for security, some systems are required like every 30 days. Yeah. So so that may be something that we need to look at. That policy is currently in the personnel manual that we're looking at making modifications to and changing the format of. So any policy change we'll bring in front of the board. The operating system for extended support, we identified, and the report identified that we do have Windows 7 and 2008 servers. They are currently supported, and they will be supported to 2020. We lost points there, or gig points, I guess you'd say, is the 20 points there is because it wasn't current Windows 8, current technology, but they still support it. We will still get security patches and updates for both the Windows 7 and the 2008 server boxes until 2020. Of course,
so this 169 is on top of the Windows 7 boxes that you had.
That's correct.
Okay.
The inactive computers, they have been removed. These were mostly desktops, virtual desktops. So those all have been removed and fixed. And users not logged in the last 30 days. Obviously, these are ones that are accounts that are already disabled. These were from the part-time employees. So we're looking at removing those completely from the system. They are inactive. There's no way anybody can log in and get into the system.
What vendor gets logged into our system?
What vendor?
Why are there vendors there? I thought, I understand employees who would be using, yeah.
For client support,
Oh, okay.
for them to log in.
Remote access to
Okay.
be able to tap in.
They can
Okay.
fix it, okay.
Sure.
Also, under the users that haven't logged in, there are some auxiliary members that have email address members that have email addresses that have not logged in and looked at their emails in quite some time. So we're looking at that as well. And then the unpopulated organization units.
These are just file directories.
Yeah, and we're looking at cleaning that up.
Did you,
Active Directory.
you have an empty folder that's sitting there?
Yeah, and it has to do with our restructuring the environment and setting up GPOs and policies. We have to
Okay.
objects into them.
So are there any of these recommendations on page 39 or 40 that have not yet been addressed? Or have these all been corrected?
We are currently working on the ones that are complete. The ones that we're currently working on is obviously the operating system, the anti-spyware and antivirus. That has all been corrected. The user password, that would be a decision deferred down the road on how tight we want our password system to be set up. But the ones that are identified never to expire are within what IT says is safe for those people to log in to do work on the system.
Okay.
And the rest of them, the operating system extended support, that it was identified, but that's not something we really need. Obviously, that is identified in Mr. Terry's long-term budget as we start to replace some of these servers and boxes. The inactive computers has been completed, and we're currently working on the last two.
How many computers do we have in the township?
It's on 41. Next page.
Yeah.
Is the inventory. Were there any other glaring issues that needed to be addressed, or that the 400-page report pointed out, or was it strictly a reporting of what's out there?
Yeah, essentially the 400-page report is condensed into what you see that was provided in your packet. If you look at the 400-page report, and the engineer spent some time going through some pages, it identifies every file folder and unsupported. There's
Sure.
pages and pages of that.
The detail.
Yes, and very good detail. One thing that Green Tree did pass on to us is that whether or not we move forward with any type of work with them, they would be willing to come back a year from now and complete this same assessment at no cost, as being
Great.
part of the community and wanting to help out.
Okay. And so they just deploy a virtual mole that goes out and discovers these.
They have a software called Network Detective.
Okay.
And it goes out and checks through all of your Active Directory, all of everything that's in your domain.
Okay. How much is that software?
It's expensive.
Yeah.
It would be not
Okay.
cost effective.
Okay.
How when they come in and do it for free? Sure.
And that's something they offer, or they said they currently will continue to do for us. And they made that clear at the end, whether we do business with them or look at any type
And they gave
of
us
shared service. One thing that we are looking at is all our current agreements and see our support agreements and what they can provide for us as well. Once we fix a lot of these things in regards to some of the user stuff and removing some of those users, Green Tree will be able to come in and provide us a detailed summary of different levels of support for the township.
In their analysis, did it provide any suggested paths forward as far as when is Windows 9 coming out? And when that does, when will our existing OS systems fall off the cliff?
We keep tabs on that. Mrs. Harris says 2020 for the
Okay.
live. We're looking at purchasing some copies of server 12
Okay.
this year. The one thing that we do have a couple Windows 2003 boxes. They'll be at the in life in July this year. They'll stop patching those. Those will be offline and surplus prior to that.
Okay. And when they're talking server aging, they're talking the in-service date of the box or the in-service date of the components that you may have upgraded inside the box?
The data hardware.
Okay.
went on.
Okay.
Did anyone else go to the cyber attack class at OTA? I did go, and I brought back the packet to give to Mr. Terry. It was very informative how local government, as well as targeting and how easy it is. It only takes one employee. But one of their main suggestions at the back was to make sure you have something in place when we get to strategic planning on how to deal with if we ever were. I know we're very
A recovery.
right. I know we're very secure, but that was pretty much the big thing I took out of it. But it was interesting, and it is hitting government.
And one thing we identified in Mr. Terry's presentation to the board during the budget hearings is working on not only that strategic plan, but also looking at a backup site within the township. And we actually asked Green Tree if they support that and what kind of things they do. It's not a hot site.
Do they have a data center there?
They outsource that.
They outsource it. Okay.
Yeah. But they had a cost, and it's an unlimited, if I recall from the presentation. So it's something to consider, and we're going to look at both doing it internally as well as them providing it. But they would monitor it, but it would be outsourced through a third party through their business.
Sure. Good points. Anything else for IT?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, moving on to roads.
Thank you, board. On page 48, you'll find two renewals. These are annual renewals. There's not an increase in cost. The first one is for the Lake Doctor maintenance renewal. This is for Phillips Park. As you can see in your packet, they do maintain a lot of things. On the second page of the, excuse me, I'll find it in your packet. On page 50, what services they provide on a monthly basis, what's included, as well as what the total cost. I do have a purchase request here and a motion in your packet.
Any questions? You wanna make a motion?
Okay.
I move to approve the renewal of the pond maintenance agreement and purchase request 00340 for 2015 to the Lake Doctor for pond maintenance in the amount of $1,400 and to authorize the township administrator to assign to the board.
Second.
Quick question, is this, and just maybe Mr. Parks, are they dyeing the pond? Are they using rice grass, or, I mean, this is just algae control?
It's algae control, but also control the reef canary grass that comes up in there.
Okay.
Because probably 4 or 5 years ago, the reef canary grass was about ready to take over the whole.
Right,
pond.
and-
They came in and cut it down ever since they started treating it.
They don't dye that blue, do they? I don't remember seeing it dyed, okay. Any other questions?
No. Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.
Thank you, board. The next is an annual renewal of the preventative maintenance program for our generators that provide backup electricity to our fire stations. There's a motion in your packet, and I have a purchase request here for the board.
Okay. Make a motion to the renewal of the preventative maintenance agreement and purchase request 00339 for the 2015 Buckeye Power sales for prevention maintenance of the fire station standby generators in the amount of $3,198.50. And authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Second.
I have a question on this one, Mr. Zareff or Tim, on the, did we competitively bid this out?
No, actually, to my knowledge, they are the single source supplier for this area, for the unit generators that we currently have.
For the brand of generator we have, they're the exclusive certified dealer, okay. They're the certified dealer. Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.
Thank you, board. In your packet is also Mr. Parks' bi-weekly report. I think we can all take a sigh of relief that the blizzard went north of us. Are there any questions in regards?
Blueberry. How are we doing with the salt?
We still have plenty.
Good. As long as we keep at the same rate that we've been doing so far.
That is correct. And actually, since this report was out 3 times since then, we're still well under last year level, so.
Well, one thing also to point out in the report, Mr. Parks and Ms. Gustafson will be conducting interviews tomorrow with the 3 final candidates for the Service Worker 1.
Is the Tahoe not yet been put on Gov Deals? We're waiting on that obviously until,
There's a couple minor pieces that need to come out.
Okay.
They're called special tours.
okay. Any questions on the bi-weekly?
The DOT physical, is that an annual thing for the CDL?
It is biannual unless you're under doctor's care.
Okay.
And then it's unannual.
That's it.
Any questions?
No, but as long as we have Mr. Parks up. I did bring back some information about the columbarium, if that's the right word, from conference. And there seems to be a Green County supplier person who's interested, who might contact you, Mr. Parks, about us putting one in our cemetery. It seems to be reasonably priced, and so he will come, maybe to you, Mrs. Zahari, and to the board as well.
Anything else for roads?
That's it for roads.
All right, move on to fire.
The board, in your packet, the first item in the agenda for the fire department is the purchase request for advanced technology for community risk and standards of coverage. This will be on page 57. This is to send the deputy chief and one of our battalion chiefs to essentially an online course on advanced technology for community risk and standards of coverage. This is identified in not only the NOVAC report, but also what we discussed in the budget hearing. This class would allow for us to use our current GIS information and conduct a community risk assessment, and even provide us station locations based on population and census tract as well. The chief can answer any additional questions with regards to the training. This is a right, Chief? 2 classes. The first one's online.
It's one class, 5 sessions.
Okay.
For each of them, and it is all online, so they'll be in their office or one of the meeting rooms taking the class.
And what kind of suggestions will come forth?
No suggestions will come from the class itself. The class will teach them to use the technology that the township has and is invested in, the data that we have available to us from census, as Mr. Zahari mentioned, from our call information that we maintain in our firehouse database, information that we have from the county auditor, and all those pieces, and put it together. And then once they've learned how to use the GIS program with that information, then they will be able to do things like community risk assessment standard of cover, which would include, for example, identifying possible station locations if you needed to add a station.
Okay,
or
in
move a
future,
station.
okay.
It should also include hot spots, cold spots, so where high volumes of calls occur, where low volumes of calls occur, which would lend itself not necessarily to station relocation, although it could. With our current facilities, we don't have any intention to do that, but it may allow us to reallocate our other resources within those stations, so apparatus and people, for example, within the existing stations.
Okay, you want a motion?
Board, I would also point out, it is under the 2,500, but there is an additional class after this. So we felt that, and that one's also under 2,500, but we wanted to make sure that we brought it before you. So because the combination of both would be over
Sure.
2,500, so.
And actually, there'll be a total of 3 this year. There's this one, the advanced technology. The next one will actually be an on-site class that's being hosted by Washington Township. That is standards of cover and accreditation, and those 2 pieces are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. So that will be about performing the standards of cover analysis, where this is using the tool for a part of that standards of cover. And then the third class that we'd like to do later on, potentially even hosting it here, would be a data analysis class that would talk about how to do fire statistics and fire analysis using the National Fire National Fire Academy's data analysis book and the data that we have. And by hosting it here, we can get more of our officers involved, and then we can open it up to the outside to finish filling in the class to help defray the cost. So there will be 3 separate, and they're all by the same CPSC, the Center for Public Safety Excellence. They are the national accrediting agency for the fire service. And since they offer all of those classes, the checks will all be written to them. The total amount by the end of the year will exceed the $2,500 limit. And in light of past history, what we don't want to do is have the impression that we're trying to take one bill and split it up multiple ways to save.
Do you know what the total will be?
Not off the top of my head.
Under
it will
5?
be- The first 2 will certainly be under 5. The first 2 will be under 3. What I don't know is what the cost would be to have the third class brought in, and depending on its cost, it may be more cost effective to send a couple people out, do a trainer, or we may try and bring it in at a defrayed cost. So when we're ready to do that, we'll bring that to the board to discuss it, because that will most likely, if we bring it here, be a higher cost that we would then try and help defray with additional
Okay.
attendance. So that one you'll see also, we're not asking for
Okay.
that at this point.
Can I ask for a motion then, and we can make a decision on this?
Move to approve a purchase request 07158 to Center for Public Safety Excellence for virtual training in the amount of $1,050, and to authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Second.
Ms. Graff?
Yes.
Or, I'm sorry, did you want more?
Any discussion? Sorry, we already had.
Yes.
You're ready, okay, Ms. Graff. Mr. Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Kretz?
Yes.
Thank you, board. The next item in your packet on page 58 is discussion in regards to the hiring of a part-time courier. Obviously, this has been in the authorized staffing for quite some time. However, and it was also discussed in the budget hearing as well. One thing that we have identified with the changes, and not only in our discussion in the special meetings with the Novak group, but it was also identified in the Novak report, is we are essentially having a battalion chief at a high cost do these type of things. And one of the suggestions, obviously, from the Novak group was they need to be getting back into the firehouse and working on being a battalion chief, as well as company officer development, and kind of removing themselves from some of these roles. One of the biggest things they spend a lot of time on, and I see them down here a lot, is running of the mail. I have 4 copies of the job description there for your review. Take a look at it. Next meeting we'll bring this back if the board wants to move forward with the hiring of a part-time courier. This will be limited to a 1,500-hour employee, pay range of $7.25 to $16.19, depending on qualifications. This position would not be eligible for health insurance.
What is our liability of having a non-officer take people for drug testing, or for medical
I was
testing?
gonna ask that, that's a good question.
I don't object to it, I just know if we have a,
Liability in what way? You mean in
well, at this point, we
If they-
have, one of the officers, or whoever it is, one of our people in a senior position, take the individual who is hurt or is going for the drug testing to the facility, to MedWorks, and back. So they have a senior person monitoring. That's,
They have to verify who they are.
well, yeah, taking them to and from, that's what I mean, keeping track of.
Yeah,
I want to know, if, would it make a difference of having a low-level part-time shuttler do it, rather than one of our full-time employees? I just want, is there a problem?
I don't think it's a problem in terms of, from a legal standpoint. I think it's more of a I don't know if trust is the right word, but more of a concern regarding, if the belief that person is under the influence or more injured than they may realize or something like that. Are there concerns in that respect? But from a purely legal standpoint, I don't know that there's a issue there.
Okay. As long as someone from one of our personnel does the transport, verifies who they are, who the person is, who they are, and then transports them back, we are okay if it's under our purview.
Yes.
Okay.
I had some concerns about the driving of the apparatus. And it sounds like you have somebody in mind who might have some experience driving apparatus. Otherwise, you'd have to train somebody.
Well, if we had hired somebody who does not have the training in that, obviously they would go through the same training process as a firefighter would to drive that vehicle.
So you're talking fire trucks, medics, ladder trucks, all that would concern me. The other thing that hit me is, would it be worth tapping into our senior retirement, to see if we had any volunteers that might be interested in, doing this kind of thing for us? You know, if you had, 2 or 3, maybe even 4 volunteers lined up, kind of like, not quite like the program the police department has with their COPPs, but you have it in the capacity of interdepartmental things, where you kind of train people where EMS gear goes once they pick it up at a hospital, and mail them where they take somebody, and the policy on taking somebody to and from a drug test or whatever. It might be worth looking into. There might be some people who would be interested in helping volunteer to support the fire department in that way. Before we hire somebody, maybe not, but I do know there are some eager people out there that would like to volunteer to help the fire department.
My question is, that's a wide range for a salary, $7 to $16. Was there a reason if we're trying
Wage to our current part-time position.
minimum wage up to our
Wage,
current
yeah, that's
part-time
where the
basis?
range is. And there's a competency ladder that's built in that may not apply to this.
Right, a minimum,
That would be the range that would be
a
looking.
minimum wage isn't gonna be able typically to operate a medic or a fire apparatus. So, and the reason they would do that versus use a township vehicle is,
I'm sorry, what was
the
it?
reason they would need to operate a medic unit?
To transport the unit for maintenance and purposes like that. So if right now, if a medic needs to
Okay.
be maintained, either one of Tim's guys on my crews have to transport it. If it was scheduled maintenance, we could send the courier up there to transport it for that purpose.
Okay, if you carved out that piece alone though, then the skill level and the pay level drops significantly, is that correct?
Likely, yes.
Okay, because the rest of this is administrative, inventory, and data entry, if I read it correctly. Am I right? In general, okay.
Just delivering mail.
Administrative, right. So, and then if you looked at the distribution of paper, is there a reason why much of this can't be done electronic? I mean, do we physically take mail from building to building?
Yes, we do every day, twice a day, actually.
Because it's
There's
delivered
usually
down
2
there.
runs. There's a
Versus
from run
scan it in and email it to somebody and,
And I'd say the fiscal office has the highest requirement for actual paper, although EMS reports is probably a close second to that. So there are 2 primary reasons for having hard copies of things that would otherwise need.
okay.
EMS reports is, without a whole lot of trouble. The fiscal office's needs are much more time.
Talking about paper and that sort, do we do central buying of all paper clips, pens, ink, whatever else we do, office supplies, to get the best rate and then distribute it through the township? Or do any departments buy their own?
We do it in one, and then it comes in and it's allocated to the
Okay,
department.
that's
in
the
order to-
paper clips and
yeah.
pencils and pens and all that, okay, very good. And we buy in bulk.
So you're not asking for approval of this today? or
No, this was
for
clearly
discussion?
just discussion. This
Okay.
was not,
Okay.
And if you have any additional questions for myself or the chief, please email them. We'll have them for the next meeting.
Okay.
We would like to have this on the next meeting for approval.
If you had a time and attendance system, you wouldn't need to last long.
That's true.
Okay.
Unless you have a piece of paper that's got a wet signature on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have to have permanent
Paper.
paper, yeah.
Thank you, board. The last item here is the gap analysis, which we already discussed. It's in the packet twice. And then the final thing is the bi-weekly activity report. Chief, is there anything that you want to point out that stands out on the report?
Not this week. I think most of it's already either been talked about or actively except for number H, or letter H, excuse me. We will have that report, March 2nd, for Mr. Chris's request at last meeting.
Thank you for modifying that one. Was there anything notable from the Township Association?
Yeah, there's a few things, in current law, the legal update, included a broad discussion about community paramedicine, which is one of the things that we've been, fighting. We've talked to the board, obviously, over about the past year, due to, frequent users of the system. Legislation is likely to change this year to allow for community paramedicine, which is something that we may not get into, but the hospitals may get into for non-emergent, in-home care. So kind of an extension of home health care. So we'll be keeping up on that to see what our changing role may or may not be. There was a brief discussion of Ebola, and basically, it is still an ongoing concern, although I think everybody has settled into the fact that it's, something that you have to be cognizant of, but it fits within most of the rest of our protocol as far as, infectious control issues. There was a discussion of, there's one other thing that's escaping my class. I'll probably remember as soon as the meeting is done. We also attended a class on prevention of chief officers, so we'll be looking at that, as a possible, professional development opportunity for our chiefs. That's sponsored by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. It's a state level version of what the Center for Public Safety Excellence, CPSC, we just discussed, has for chief officers also. So CPSC does it at a national level, Ohio Fire Chiefs does it at a state level, and we'll be evaluating that. Some good information out there, some things for us to work on. We discussed at the trade show, we met with the Office of Shared Services. We've worked with them in the past, I believe, on data transmission. I think our backhaul for Marks may go through them, or for CAT, I don't recall which. But they provide a lot of services to state and local customers. We're looking at them as a possible source for providing the hard billing for non-residents. So they do collection work, basically. They do it a lot of times for things like
It's a bolt-on to what we have now.
yes, basically, our current provider, McKesson, used to be Med 3000. We'll continue to do all the OIG billing that we do now, which is separating out resident versus non-resident billing appropriately. When it gets to the point right now where we do a write-off because people have not paid the bill, that write-off will still occur from McKesson, and then that information would then go as appropriate to OSS or another vendor like them. We have 3 that we're exploring currently, including OSS. And then that provider would basically start fresh and try and collect. And there's usually, most of those seem like they work on a percentage of collections that they're able to get for you. So we're working on that information right now.
That was a state organization, wasn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
State agency is part of the Department of Administrative Services.
Yeah.
Do they do factoring in that market segment?
That I don't know, and that's, we're just starting down this path again, so we'll be meeting with 3 different agencies
You
to
don't
find
know
out
about-
how they do it.
you don't know
how
about
it's
factoring?
information.
Oh,
Where
no.
they'll buy the receivable just for a diminished.
Yeah, I don't know. Last time I put
Rather
payment
than
plans, I talked to that.
OSS's model is that you get a percentage of what they collect, so they
Okay.
don't buy the debt for any, they just.
They have no
whatever
risk
they get,
other
you
than
get.
their collection.
Correct,
Yeah.
and their
Percentage.
percentage is 6% off of the top of whatever they collect.
And it's success rate only then. So
Yeah,
if they're
60%
successful,
successful.
it's success rate, so there's no cost to the township with that.
No, no
Great.
cost.
Unless they collect.
Right.
You mentioned Ebola, but I think what's even more
That's the beauty of it. It's no cost to us,
of
it's a
concern
state
to me
organization.
is the measles and mumps, of which they seem to be an outbreak across many states. I would hope that all of our responders have been vaccinated and are aware of what these issues might be with these 2 diseases.
Yeah, so our folks are required or strongly recommended to have a number of vaccines. I don't recall if measles is specifically listed as one of those, although most of us came up in the generation where everybody got the vaccine, so we're all pretty well situated. New kids coming in.
Your
it's gonna
ages,
be-
yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be a more interesting discussion. But it is covered in the infectious control part of all of the EMS programs, and is part of what they look to when they're talking about personal protective equipment. You'll hear them refer to occasionally BSI, body substance isolation, but it's gowns, gloves, goggles, face masks, all those things. They use those as appropriate based off of the presentation of the patient.
Okay. Any other notable items from the?
No, sir.
Okay, great. Anything else for fire? Administrator? Okay, legal advisor?
And I know I mentioned the executive session, I'm assuming you might wanna do that at the end, but I wanted to, also just briefly talk to you. After last meeting, I had told you I was going to a meeting with the coroner's office and all the local entities to discuss the issue of indigent bodies and burials, and, I just kinda wanted to give you briefly, the issue came up, from the coroner's office because it is becoming a nationwide problem, and a growing problem in, nationwide, but it's also in this area. Luckily, from speaking with Ms. Hayden, who was there on behalf of other townships, myself, I mean, we don't specifically have a problem, but some of the cities nearby, range anywhere from, 5 to 10 a year to 15 even at times. And so the coroner just kind of wanted to have a discussion with the entities because of what was determined to be the primary issue is that of storage. And that being because of the situation, the one that I'm aware of that we've had, and according to Tim, we haven't had one, but in like the past 20 years, we were lucky to be notified ahead of time. So we had the ability to plan for it. That's not normally the case. And so the township was kind of ahead of some of the other local entities who don't even have a policy in place. But they wanted to make sure everyone kind of was aware, one, that you have somebody who is on call 24 hours a day, because the coroner's office often gets called out to these things. If it's not a coroner's case, they won't take the body. They won't do anything with the body. And Greene County's coroner's office has no storage for a body. And Montgomery County's coroner's office has indicated to Greene County they cannot take any more bodies. They have in the past over time, people scramble, sometimes Green Memorial will be able to, but there's the issue of storage throughout the county, and so the entities kind of came together to determine that was the primary concern, and so the counties, they're going to go back to the commissioners and see if there's anything that can be looked into of that, but they also wanted to make sure that your policy dealt with specifically transportation, particularly when you're looking at issues of decomposed bodies, if it's not somebody that's found for a long time, and because a lot of times fire departments and other entities won't transport that. And so before I spent the time, I just want to go back and look at the policy that we put in place a couple years ago, make sure that some of the issues that came up in that meeting, we're sure that it's addressed, and then, if there's something that we need to change, I'll bring that before you all. I don't think it'll take much, because I think most those things were covered in the policy, but I just want to look over it.
An update check.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do the hospitals have these storage facilities now that we have two?
Well, they said Sowen very rarely will be able to, and they don't take what they call decomposed bodies. They often, or not often, but they have in the past been able to convince Green Memorial to, for a short period, in order to determine what to do, because that's part of the problem often, is determining
Where they should go?
whether it's going to be an indigent burial as their family, anything like that. But the concern is there's no guarantee that Greene County's going to do that, and what do you do then?
What's your fail-safe?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so they've talked about looking at a
Freezer.
some type of
Buy a big freezer and have it available?
Well,
That's what they use at GMH, is the old morgue that was there
Yeah.
till the mid-80s, the late 80s, I think, before they moved everything over to the Montgomery County court or lab. I forget what it's called, but the criminal lab over
crime
there.
lab.
So yeah, but what Ms. Frick is saying is there's no guarantee that once it's there, the body's there, that anybody's that's gonna come and pick it up, and then it falls on the responsibility of the hospital. So they're very cautious about accepting, and even at a limited basis at the GMH.
Is there a problem with just proceeding? I mean, if you can't get a hold of the next of
You
kin,
have to find out who it is.
just, instead of storing a body somewhere, just proceed with the burial and then try to do the notification of the next of kin.
Well,
Because-
the problem is even for a short-term basis,
Yeah.
if it happens in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
or it happens over a weekend or
I
something
gotcha.
like that,
Right.
where do you take it in the interim? Sometimes you can take them to, funeral homes. There was one funeral
Yeah.
home that is in Fairborn that she was there, and she doesn't have storage. She's like, if you bring the body, I don't even have storage to get them through even a day or two.
Okay.
And that's, so they've talked about looking into a trailer or things like that, that maybe, countywide could be used in the event
Maybe
of
that'd be a
a
good
situation
project
or
as a
something like that.
temporary trailer morgue for the county. As a
Buy a
countywide project.
old restaurant freezer
just like
put
a
it somewhere and
refrigerator
store.
Okay, so you'll do and when you bring that back, if we can add that to the beginning of the agenda, so we don't end that way, it would be much appreciated.
Well,
Okay, anything else from legal?
No.
And you'll have that at the next meeting?
The executive session is gonna be at the end, so.
And, okay, trustees, Mr. Paxson,
no.
Ms. Graff,
No, I think we've all picked up a little good information from conference, whatever. It's always interesting to see what other people do and what can be done, and we should spend some time discussing it at some point, but I don't think there's anything specific.
okay. Fiscal office, permanent appropriations,
Resolution for permanent appropriations, it's on the back, and then there's,
Okay. I move that we approve the permanent appropriations for calendar year 2015 in the amount of $25,298,210.03.
Second,
Mr. Paxson,
Yes.
Ms. Graff,
yes.
Mr. Kretz.
yes.
I do not authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
No, not this one. Nor would I want it.
Legal invoices, anything else fiscal office?
No,
Okay,
thank you.
legal invoices, Mr. Paxson.
I think I signed them.
You wanna make a motion or you want
I make a motion, we approve the legal
I think it's on the
invoices.
top corner.
invoice number?
Invoice number 2673415 in the amount of $11,665.
To whom?
To whom?
To
I'm sorry. That would be
Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister.
Taft, Stettinius and Hollister LLP.
Second,
Mr. Paxson,
Yes.
Ms. Graff,
yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes. And at this point, I'll look for a motion, yep, to go into executive
So
session,
we have 5 minutes.
into
Okay.
executive session 121.22.
22G1, appointment, employment, or compensation of a public employee.
Second.
Context, sorry. Ms. Graff,
Yes?
Mr. Paxson,
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.